That Monday morning, when I walked into my courtroom, I knew something was different. The air felt tense, still heavy, the way it feels right before a storm rolls in. I've been a judge for decades, but every now and then, a case arrives that carries a certain weight before it even begins. And this was one of them. Because the moment the doors opened, she walked in as if she owned not just a room, but the world. Isabella Cruz, daughter of Tom Cruise, Hollywood royalty, social media darling, a young woman whose designer boots alone probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She walked with that unmistakable kind of confidence that comes from a life spent in velvet ropes, private jets, red carpets, and people telling you you're special long before you've done anything to earn it. Her sunglasses were still on, indoors, at 8:45 in the morning. Behind her, like a private security detail, came 3 attorneys, high-end polished, the type who charge more per hour than a working family brings home in a week. But then I saw him, sitting in the front row, wearing a warm Marine Corps jacket, was Samuel Hargrove, 69 years old, a homeless veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. His beard was white and untrimmed. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from years of untreated PTSD and the cold nights he'd spent sleeping under bridges. He tried to sit up straight, but his body was tired. His eyes carried that look I've seen far too often, that mixture of dignity and exhaustion found only in people who fought for a country that later struggled to fight for them. When Isabella walked past him, she didn't acknowledge him. She didn't even see him. To her, he wasn't a person. He was background noise. And that was the problem. The charges filed were assault, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the police report and several eyewitnesses, Samuel had been volunteering at a community cafe that gave meals to the homeless. He often helped clean tables in exchange for food. That day, Isabella Cruz arrived with 2 friends, all laughing, filming themselves, ordering lavishly. At one point, Samuel approached to clean a small spill near her chair. He politely said, "Ma'am, I can wipe this up so you don't slip." And Isabella responded, not with gratitude, not with kindness, but with venom. "What are you doing this close to me?" she snapped. "Don't touch anything near me. And don't call me ma'am. I'm not your charity case." Witnesses said she then turned to her friends and said loudly, "Oh my God, these people are everywhere. Can't the city keep them away from normal folks?" Samuel, embarrassed, simply stepped back and apologized. But it didn't end there. When he reached for a cloth on the floor, his hands shook. PTSD triggers often made his hands tremble. Isabella laughed and said, "Look at that. He's shaking like a drug addict. Disgusting. This is why I don't want these people around me." Then she kicked over her own drink, splashing across the floor, and said, "Clean it. That's what people like you are for." Samuel didn't react with anger. He reacted with shame. He simply whispered, "I serve this country, ma'am." And Isabella replied, "Yeah, well, maybe you should have served yourself a better life." That's when she threw the used napkins at him. He didn't fight back. He didn't raise his voice. He just lowered his head. Someone recorded the incident. It went viral. And that video is what brought her into my courtroom. I took a deep breath and began the hearing. "Miss Cruz," I said, "you are charged with assault, harassment, and intentionally causing emotional harm to Mr. Samuel Hargrove, a homeless veteran. How do you plead?" Before she could speak, her lead attorney, a tall man with a perfect haircut and the confidence of someone who's never lost a case he couldn't settle with money, stood. "Your Honor," he said, "Miss Cruz pleads not guilty. The incident has been exaggerated and misrepresented online. What occurred was a misunderstanding between my client and a man who approached her aggressively." I raised my hand. "Counselor," I said, "I've watched the video. I've read the statements. I've seen enough misunderstandings to know the difference between confusion and cruelty." He shifted uncomfortably. I turned to Isabella. Miss Cruz, do you have something you'd like to say before we begin? She slid off her sunglasses. Finally, her eyes were filled not with remorse, but annoyance. Your Honor, she said, I'm a public figure. People recognize me everywhere. This man approached me in a way that made me uncomfortable. And now I'm being dragged into court because people love to attack the rich and famous. I didn't do anything wrong. If he was offended, that's not my fault. I can't control how people feel. The words hit the courtroom like a slap. I glanced at Samuel. He was staring down at his shoes, ashamed even to make eye contact. Miss Cruz, I said softly, a man who fought for your freedom to walk into this courtroom feels small today because of your actions. Do you understand that? She shrugged. He made me uncomfortable. Why is no one talking about that? Because I thought discomfort is not the same as disrespect. And your discomfort came from prejudice, not danger. But I didn't say it. Not yet. Prosecution. I said, present your evidence. The prosecutor, Ms. Hernandez, stepped forward with a tablet. Your Honor, we have multiple angles of video footage recorded by bystanders. With the court's permission, we'd like to play it. I nodded. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered on. And there it was, clear as day. Samuel kneeling to wipe a spill, his hands slightly trembling. Isabella rolling her eyes, her friends giggling, her voice sharp and loud. Don't come near me. Oh my God, he stinks. Why do these people even exist in public spaces? In the video, Samuel simply stood still, stunned. Then came the words that made half the courtroom gasp. You're dirty, and you're shaking. You look like a junkie. Clean this up and don't talk to me. Watching that video, I felt something shift inside me. I've sentenced murderers, thieves, and abusers, but there is a particular kind of cruelty that cuts deeper than violence. A cruelty that strips a person of dignity simply because you assume you're better than them. And that is what Isabella Cruz had done. When the video ended, the room fell into silence, so heavy it felt physical. I looked at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't ashamed. She was irritated, as if all of this was an inconvenience. Miss Cruz, I said quietly, you watched that video. You heard your own voice. What do you have to say? She folded her arms. I have to say the video doesn't show everything. He was too close. It made me uncomfortable. I reacted. That's it. And honestly, I think everyone's overreacting. People are so sensitive these days. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and something inside me broke, but not in anger, in sadness. Because here, sitting in front of me, was a young woman raised in privilege so overwhelming that she had lost the ability to recognize humanity itself. I took a slow breath. Mr. Hargrove, I said, would you please approach? Samuel stood slowly, leaning on the bench for support as he made his way forward. Up close, I could see the scars along his forearms, shrapnel wounds from a roadside explosion years ago. He stood next to Isabella, who refused to even look at him. Mr. Hargrove, I said gently, tell me about the moment this happened. Tell me how it made you feel. His voice trembled. Your Honor, I've been homeless for 11 years. I've lost a lot. People don't look at me. They don't talk to me. They pretend I'm invisible. But that day when she said those things, it felt worse than being invisible. It felt like I was trash. His voice broke. I served my country for 19 years. I watched friends die. I came home and couldn't find work. But I'm still trying. I volunteer. I clean. I stay out of trouble. I'm just trying to be human again. Isabella rolled her eyes. I saw it. The entire courtroom saw it. And that's when I stood up. When I stand, people know something is coming. When I stood up from the bench, the room went still. There's a sound a courtroom makes when people sense a turning point. Chairs stop shifting. Breathing slows. Even the attorneys straighten their posture. I stepped down from the bench, not to intimidate, but to eliminate distance. Justice isn't always delivered from above. Sometimes it has to be delivered face to face. I walked until I was standing between Isabella Cruz and Samuel Hargrove. "Miss Cruz," I said calmly, "look at him." She hesitated. Then she glanced, barely. "No," I said, firmer now, "not a glance. Look at him." She lifted her eyes. For the first time since she'd entered my courtroom, she actually saw the man she'd humiliated. "Mr. Hargrove is 69 years old." I continued. "He served this country during wartime. He carries shrapnel in his body and memories in his mind that don't let him sleep at night. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't have a safety net. And yet, he shows up every day to help others in exchange for a meal. That is not weakness. That is resilience." I paused, then turned back to her. "You called him dirty. You called him a junkie. You told him people like him shouldn't exist in public spaces. Do you understand the weight of those words?" She sighed. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I didn't know his life story. I just reacted. People say things when they're uncomfortable." I nodded slowly. "That's true," I said. "People do say things when they're uncomfortable, and what they say in those moments reveals who they really are." Her attorney jumped in quickly. "Your Honor, my client is young. She's grown up under intense scrutiny. She's constantly approached by strangers. Her reaction, while perhaps inappropriate, does not rise to the level of criminal behavior." I turned to him. "Counselor," I said, "approaching someone to clean a spill is not a threat. Serving your country is not a crime. Being homeless is not an invitation to be dehumanized." Then I looked at the prosecutor, Ms. Hernandez. I said, "What else do you have?" She stepped forward again. "Your Honor, we'd like to introduce the defendant's social media activity following the incident." The screen lit up once more. There it was, an Instagram story posted less than an hour after the incident. A photo of Isabella laughing with her friends in a luxury car. The caption read, "Just got harassed by some gross homeless guy. Why does society let these people roam free?" Another post followed. "If you can't handle your life, don't make it everyone else's problem." The gallery reacted immediately. Gasps, whispers. One woman shook her head in disbelief. I felt my jaw tighten. "Miss Cruz," I said, "you didn't just insult this man in person. You broadcasted your contempt to millions of people." She crossed her arms again. "I was venting," she said. "Everyone vents online." I looked at her for a long moment. "Venting," I replied, "is complaining about traffic. Venting is being frustrated with a bad day. What you did was weaponize your platform against a man who has no voice." I turned back to Samuel. "Mr. Hargrove," I said, "after this incident, what happened to you?" He swallowed hard. "I stopped going to the cafe. Your Honor, people recognized me from the video. Some laughed. Some took pictures. One kid asked me if I was the dirty homeless guy from Instagram. I didn't feel safe anymore." His shoulders sagged. "I already feel invisible most days. That made me feel hunted." Isabella shifted uncomfortably. I nodded, then took a breath. This court has heard enough. I returned to the bench, but I didn't sit. "Miss Cruz," I said, "this case is not about discomfort. It's not about fame. And it's certainly not about cancel culture. This case is about dignity." I leaned forward. For decades, I've seen people stand where you're standing. Some had nothing. Some had everything. And I'll tell you something I've learned the hard way. Character is not revealed when life is easy. It's revealed when you believe no one is watching. Her eyes flickered. You believed no one would hold you accountable because of your last name, because of your wealth, because of your influence. I paused. In my courtroom, none of that matters. Her attorney stood again. "Your Honor, we request leniency. Miss Cruz has no prior criminal record. We're willing to offer a financial settlement and a public apology." I raised my hand. "Sit down," I said. "This is not a negotiation." The room was silent. "Miss Cruz," I continued, "I find you guilty of harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. As for the assault charge, throwing used napkins and intentionally spilling a drink on another person, this court also finds you guilty." Her face drained of color. "You will be held accountable." Tears welled in her eyes for the first time, not from empathy, but from fear. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking now. "This will destroy my reputation." I met her gaze. "No," I said quietly. "Your actions did that. I'm just responding to them." I took a breath before delivering the sentence. Here is what's going to happen. She leaned forward slightly, as if bracing for impact. "You will serve 45 days in the county correctional facility, not house arrest, not a suspended sentence. 45 days where your money, your fame, and your last name won't protect you." Her attorney gasped. "Additionally," I continued, "you will complete 600 hours of community service working directly with homeless veterans through the Department of Veterans Affairs. You will listen. You will serve. You will learn." She began to cry openly now. "You will also pay full restitution to Mr. Hargrove, $25,000 for emotional distress, loss of safety, and damage caused by your public statements." Samuel's eyes widened. He hadn't expected anything like that. "And finally," I said, "you will issue a public apology not written by your publicist, not filtered through lawyers, recorded by you, acknowledging what you did, why it was wrong, and what you learned. That apology will remain posted for no less than 1 year." She shook her head. "Please," she whispered. "My father—" I stopped her. "Your father," I said gently, "is known for his professionalism and respect for people at every level of this industry. What you did stands in direct contrast to that. He cannot fix this for you." I turned to Samuel. "Mr. Hargrove," I said, "this court cannot undo the harm you suffered, but it can affirm your dignity. You are not invisible here." Tears streamed down his face. "Thank you, Your Honor," he whispered. I looked out at the gallery. "Let this be a lesson," I said. "Homelessness is not a moral failure. Poverty is not a character flaw. And service to this country does not expire when the uniform comes off." I raised the gavel. Court is adjourned. As the bailiff approached Isabella, she looked back at Samuel. For the first time, there was no arrogance, only shame. 3 months later, Isabella Cruz stood in my courtroom again. But this time, if you didn't know her last name, you wouldn't have recognized her. No designer clothes, no sunglasses, no entourage, just plain jeans, a simple sweater, hair pulled back tight, face bare. The confidence that once filled the room before she entered was gone. In its place was something quieter, heavier, accountability. She stood alone at the defense table, hands clasped, eyes lowered. Samuel Hargrove sat in the gallery again, but he wasn't wearing the same jacket. The VA had helped him secure transitional housing, clean clothes, medical care. He sat straighter now, not because his life was suddenly easy, but because someone had finally told him he mattered. I took my seat and looked at Isabella. "Miss Cruz," I said, "you were ordered to return after completing your custodial sentence and a portion of your community service. You asked to address the court. You may proceed." She swallowed hard. "Your Honor," she began, her voice shaking, "I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to explain myself. I'm here to take responsibility." She paused, fighting tears. "I spent 45 days in jail. No cameras, no fans, no protection. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't escape who I was. People didn't care who my father was. They cared how I treated them." She looked up, then turned toward Samuel. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "I'm sorry." The word hung in the air. "I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as an inconvenience. And that's something I'm ashamed to admit. I used my privilege like a weapon. I humiliated you. I dehumanized you, and then I broadcast it like it was entertainment. Her voice cracked. I was wrong, completely wrong. Samuel listened silently. She continued. The community service, it changed me. I worked with homeless veterans. I heard their stories. I met men and women who gave everything to this country and came home to nothing. I learned that trauma doesn't disappear when the war ends, and that dignity isn't tied to housing, money, or status. She wiped her eyes. I can't undo what I did, but I can promise I'll never treat another human being that way again. She turned back to me. Your Honor, you said character is revealed when no one is watching. You were right. I didn't like what I saw when I finally had to look at myself. I'm trying to become better than that person. The courtroom was silent. I looked at Samuel. Mr. Hargrove, I said, you're not required to respond, but if you wish to speak, you may. He stood slowly. Your Honor, he said, I carry a lot of anger after that day. Not just at her, at the world. Being homeless already makes you feel invisible. What happened made me feel less than human. He took a breath. But something else happened too. People reached out. Veterans reached out. This court reminded me that I still have value. He looked at Isabella. I don't excuse what you did, but I see that you're trying. And for my own peace, I forgive you. Isabella broke down completely. Not performative tears. Real ones. I felt something shift in the room. I leaned forward. Miss Cruz, I said, for the record, the court acknowledges your compliance with the sentence and the sincerity of your statement today. I paused, but let me be clear. Redemption is not a moment. It's a lifelong process. What you do after this, when the cameras are gone, that's what will matter. She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I turned to the gallery. I want to say something to everyone here, and everyone watching this. I stood. I presided over thousands of cases. And if there's one truth I've learned, it's this. How you treat people who can do nothing for you says everything about who you are. I gestured gently toward Samuel. This man served his country. He fell through the cracks. And instead of being met with compassion, he was met with contempt. That's not just a failure of manners. That's a failure of humanity. Then I looked at Isabella. And this young woman learned the hard way that fame does not insulate you from consequences. Privilege does not excuse cruelty. And apologies mean nothing without change. I picked up the gavel, then paused. Mr. Hargrove, I said, this court is pleased to note that your restitution has been paid in full and that you are receiving ongoing support. I wish you strength and stability going forward. He nodded, eyes shining. Miss Cruz, I continued, this matter is now closed, but the lesson remains open. Carry it with you. She whispered, I will. I brought the gavel down. Court adjourned. As people stood to leave, Samuel approached Isabella. He extended his hand. She took it, not for the cameras, not for forgiveness, but for recognition. That moment, that quiet handshake, meant more than any sentence I could ever impose. As they walked out separate doors, I sat for a moment longer. Justice isn't about destroying people. It's about holding them accountable and giving them the chance to become better than who they were. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity belongs to everyone, that veterans deserve respect, and that privilege never excuses cruelty, then share this video. Because the lesson isn't about a famous last name. It's about who we choose to be when faced with another human being. That's the real verdict.